So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to look at Visual Studio and writing an application or writing a program that can basically teach us some of the fundamental things that we need to know when moving on to an advanced class. So you would ask, well, if I've already gone through the fundamentals, why would I need something to show me what I need to do to go through the advanced class? Well, we've all been there before. You know, you've written something in the past, went back and read it, and you realize you don't remember writing this, and it looks like someone else wrote it. So either a ghost wrote it or you actually wrote it and you just don't remember. Well, this happens all the time when it comes to courses or things that you've learned, especially in programming. If you programmed something a year before and you went back to look at it, you probably won't even know where to start unless you had comments or something like that in it and well-documented code base. But most of the time, I know you guys don't do that, even though I teach you to do that. But in any case, let's talk about the program that we're going to write today. And the program we're going to write today is going to be something fundamental that will give us an understanding of the things that we need to understand before we go to an advanced class. Because what happens most of the time is that you end up taking a course, right? It would probably a year ago, and then you decide to go to the advanced course. Well, you can't go back if you passed it and take the fundamentals course. So you get thrown into this advanced course, and then all of a sudden you say, okay, what was I supposed to remember again? And so we're going to fix that in this video, and we're going to make one program that's going to basically give you sort of a slight overview of the things that you need to know. So let's go ahead and get started. Here, what we have is Visual Studio, and that's what we're going to be using. If you don't remember, Visual Studio is the IDE, and that's an integrated development environment that we're going to use to program our application. And I have Visual Studio here. So if you don't have Visual Studio, go ahead and download Visual Studio, and I'll sit here and I'll wait. So I see you, and you're not downloading it right now. So I'm going to wait here until you do. Okay, so no, I'm just joking. I'm not going to wait that long. So here we go. I have Visual Studio, and by now you should have Visual Studio as well. And in Visual Studio 2022, there's a lot of extra things in here if you have an older version, and because we're doing fundamentals, you don't have to worry about any of that. All you have to worry about is understanding the code constructs that we use, and I'll try my best to make sure that is as simple as possible to understand. So when you first open up Visual Studio, you'll get this view here, this prompt over here with your recent projects. And if you don't have any recent projects, that's fine, especially if you just now downloaded it. But if you've been using it, you'll see that here on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you'll have your Getting Started menu. What we want to be able to do is go down here to the Create New Project. Going to click on that. And then we want a type of project. We don't want a web-based project. And these are the previous projects that we probably chose. In this video, we're going to be using C#. So what I want to be able to do here is use C# as the language. And then I'm going to go here to make sure that it's a Windows application. And then I want to make sure that it's a console-based application. And there's a difference between the console-based applications and the desktop applications and all these other options you have here. And it's predicated on the fact that they have more overhead and more things that you can work with as opposed to the console application. The console application is basically the black screen, you know, text, and you're dealing with very minimal properties and everything. You don't even have to worry about windows or anything, or buttons or anything like that. So that we're focusing more on the code, and that's why we're using a console application. Now, what we also want to do here is choose one of these templates here. So when you choose these templates, it sets everything up for you to start coding, so you don't have to set all that stuff up yourself, like libraries, classes, some things like that, just to get you ready to go programming your first application, or in this case, our application that we're going to learn from. So here I'm going to choose this right here. I'm going to choose console app.NET framework. If you don't see that, this one's okay too. If this is the only one you see, that's fine. But this is the one I'm going to choose. And then I'm going to go next. Now here, what I'm going to do is name my application. So let's see. In this application, we want to be able to create something that's going to give us the fundamentals of programming. So we need classes, and we can probably use lists, some object-oriented stuff. So we can either do a car program about cars. Let's see, list of cars. Actually, I'm not into cars that much, so let's do book lists. Let's do that. That way we can use libraries, we can use classes and the council, and we can use collections. Yeah, that sort of stuff. So we'll do this. And then what you want to do is choose where you want to save it. So you click on this little button right here, and it'll open up, and you choose where you want to save your project. So go ahead and do that. So once you've chosen where you're going to save your project, you want to make sure here that the solution name, you want to check this place solution and project in the same directory. So it's all in the same folder. And we're going to be using this framework.net framework 4.5. If you don't see that, it's fine because we're doing fundamentals, so it's not that big a deal. You don't have to worry about anything. I'm going to hit create. And here's what you should be presented with. If you chose the other template, it will not have any of this, but don't worry, it just doesn't look like it doesn't have any of it, but it does have it. So you'll be able to do exactly the same thing. Even if you were literally to write this out, it'll do exactly the same thing, so you don't have to worry about it. But this is our console window here. Let me move this over here so you can see everything. Up here, we have our start button to start our application. We have our file menu up here. Over here to the right, we have our Solutions Explorer, and we have our book lists project here. And you remember, this area right here is what we named our project. So everything, if I scroll down, everything in here is going to be in our project, including this program.cs. Now, this program.cs is this same program.cs tab here. So if you were presented with this, nothing here, but you can see this over here, all you have to do is double click on that and it'll open up. Whatever you double click over here will open up as a tab. So if I were to go ahead and click on this app.config, I click on that. Now you can see this app.config XAML file open up, and here's my program file. So that's how everything works. With the program file, I can run this program even though there's nothing between these two brackets, because this is where everything will be run. I can hit start and it will still run, but there's nothing's going to happen because I haven't written any code. So if I hit start, it runs and it closes immediately. And that's what console window apps do. They run and they close. You have to sort of tell it not to close. But one easy way to do this is for me to go to debug. Once I go to debug, then I can go to start without debugging, and then it'll run and stay open. So if you ever want to do that without using code, then it'll automatically do that. And if I hit enter, it'll close itself. So the first fundamental thing we want to look at here is creating a comment. And the way we create comments is we do these two slashes here, and you can write anything you want. And if you remember, a comment is not code. It's just text that will not be compiled. It will not run. So it doesn't matter what you put there. It's just there as a note, or maybe a to-do list of things that you want to remember. So when you come back to your code. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a comment of write to the console window. So if I put right to the console window here, I'm just telling myself, hey, remember, this next code is going to be what I'm going to be using to write to the console window. So underneath that, let's use one standard thing that we use inside of the console window app is to be able to write something to the window. Right now, if I hit F5, it'll run and it'll close. If I hit Control F5, it'll do that debug thing where it stays. And there's nothing there, as you can see, even though I have this here, okay? So now let's do something where I write to the console. So I'm going to go console.writeLine, and then I can put that in parentheses and then in quotes. Quotes means that it's a text. And I can say, hello world. And at the end of all of that, I'm going to hit the semicolon. Now, I'll show you how I actually like to do this. I like to do it more like this. So I like to say console.writeLine, or yeah, write line. And I like to put everything this way first. And then I put double quotes. And then I write the text in there, whatever I want. The reason why I do that is because later on it prevents errors, meaning I will not forget the semicolon because it was already there. I won't forget one of these. I won't forget the quotes. I won't forget the anything. And so I make the template first and then I write whatever I want, because sometimes you're writing something and you have to put other variables inside of this that may not seem like initially like it's going to be an issue until you start doing stuff like this where you're missing components if it was very long. So it's always better to write out it as a template first. So now when I hit Shift F5 or Control F5, sorry, now we can see here it says Hello World there. So now that we did that little test that we can now write to the window, we now want to go ahead and start our application. So the next fundamental thing we want to focus on is going to be classes. From the previous class course, from the previous courses, when you did your fundamentals class, probably a few things that you learned sort of in the middle of the, I guess, the course maybe, or even close to the beginning. You learned about classes and properties. At the very beginning, you learned about variables. So we can talk about that as well, as long as we do it within the construct of object-oriented programming, which means we'll be talking about classes and the properties within that class. So here, if you look at this, we are already dealing with a class, and this class is called program. Here we're dealing with a function. So we're already getting right into the fundamentals here. We're dealing with a particular function called main. And to really drive this point home so you can understand that functions must exist, this function must exist within this class. And when you're looking at C#, you're looking at everything being encapsulated with these brackets here, you see? So when I click on this bracket here, it shows a little dotted line that goes all the way down, showing that this is the closing bracket. Here's a function, and here are the brackets that open and close that function. So everything for this function goes between those two brackets. That's what allows this to run. So this is a sort of a main thing you want to be able to sort of really remember from your fundamentals courses. Now, this function is called main. That's the name of the function. Let's go backwards. Here, it's called void. And here, it's a static function. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But just understand that this is labeled as a static function. It doesn't return anything. That's what void is. And then the name of it is main. And now, within the parentheses here, we have variables or arguments, a variable called args, and it's being fed inside of this function here. And so I'm trying my best not to go to too much detail here, because you don't have to really focus on that right now. Just understand that this function right here has arguments, and it's a void and it's static. Now, when we run our program, because this is a traditional console application, it already knows to run this main function. There are ways through our properties we can proclaim that another function can run this, but for right now, just understand that this main function is automatically going to run. Now, let's look at how we can make our own function. Since we're trying to move up from the fundamentals courses, fundamentally, we need to know how to make our own functions. Well, we already know how to do the void. We already know how to do the main. But because this class right here is a static class, every function we make in this class has to be static. For instance, if I were to just say void print to screen, and then I was to open and close those brackets, and then I was to take this information here, cut it out of there, and paste it in here, I have myself a function. Now, this function is grayed out almost. It's not quite grayed out, but it looks grayed out. What Visual Studio is telling me here is that I'm not even using this. So why do I have this function? I'm not using it anywhere. Remember, in the console window, this one is automatically going to run. And so whatever is in here is the main program that you're running. This right here is outside the main program, but inside the class. Remember, functions must exist inside of the class. So that's the reason why this is grayed out. And in fact, if I put my mouse over this, you'll see this little light come up over here. And if I click down on that, it's giving me some suggestions to fix this issue. But we already know what it is. So I just need to take this name and put it inside of here and close those brackets and close it. And this is how I can use this function. But if you notice now, I get an error. And now we're talking about the other sort of debugging thing that we need to remember from the fundamentals class. This red squiggly line at the bottom is an error. That means your application is not going to run because there's a problem. So let's look at how we can look and see and read what that problem might be. If I go down here inside where you might see output, you may not see like the error list or anything like that. So what you want to do is at the bottom, let me see if I can show this. There we go. At the bottom, you'll have this list. You'll see something called errors list. And then it'll tell you what the error is. And here we can see the description of the error. And we see that this error is a non-static field, method or property. And so that is the issue. And it tells us it's on line 13. So I go to line 13 and I can see that's the error. And basically what this error is saying is that you're trying to use a function that's not static, but trying to use that function in a static program or a static class. So all I need to do is add the static here. And now that program will work. So now what's going to happen here, that error leaves. And when I run this, this main program will start. It's going to look at my function name, and the program is going to jump all the way down here, which leads us to another sort of fundamentals programming thing that we should learn, we should know from our last course. And that's going to be walking through our application. And the way we do that is we go to debug, and then we can click on start debugging, which will run. But before we want to do that, we want to put a breakpoint. And I'm going to put a breakpoint by putting my mouse over here into this gutter area. And I'm going to put the breakpoint where 13 is. I want it to stop there. You see, so that little red dot means breakpoint, and this turns red. And now when I run my program, it's going to start running, and it's going to stop at this breakpoint. So I can sort of walk through the process with you. And so I'm going to hit start or hit F5, hit start. And now you'll notice this did start, but the program stopped here. This is why you see nothing here. So now I'm going to walk through this. And this menu up here at the top, you'll see this will stop the program, but this right here will step into the next line of code. And I can hit F11 to do the same thing. So here it says I'm here at print to screen function, and down here you'll see a new sort of view, and it's telling us what's being evaluated. So now I'm going to hit F11, and notice the code cursor jumped down here. You see this little arrow, it tells us where we are. So here I am, and it tells us the speed in which it got there. And so now I'm there. I'm going to hit F11 again. And now it skipped past our comment, and it went straight to this line of code. And I'm gonna hit, so it's evaluating it. Now it's going to run it, hit F11. And it's saying if I step into this, I'm going to step into other properties that go deep inside of this right line in the console. And I don't want to do that. I want to go ahead and step over this, meaning I don't want to go inside of this code. I just want to go past what's inside that code. And now it goes to this last line, and I'm going to hit F11 again, and it jumps back up here. And then you look over here, and you see that this came here. So we see how this application works. We see that it goes here. We used our function, and then our function ran, and we learned how to debug that function so that way it works with a static class. Now I want to remove this breakpoint just by clicking it again. That's how we remove it. And now we can move on to the core part of our program, of our book list. So the core part of our book list is actually making the book. Now, in programming, object-oriented programming, everything is an object. So a book would be an object, meaning this program is an object because it is a class. So in order for us to make our program, we need to make a book class. And classes are made just like you see here. So I'm going to go above here inside the same namespace. And namespace is just a way of organizing classes. So I'm going to go in there and I'm going to make a class and I'm going to call that class book. I want to make sure the class name is capitalized. So that's a naming convention we'll use. And I'll go ahead and open and close that class like this. Now that's it. We have a class. And you just have to remember that this is how classes are made. Now, you notice I made a class in the same file. I could actually make a class that's in a different file, but for the sake of, tutorial and so it can be clear, I'm doing it all in the same file here under the programs.cs. So now let's talk about variables. Variables, we hold information with variables. Think of variables like a box. If you don't remember from the fundamentals class, you can make any variable you want, but it can be a string, it could be integers, it could be floats, it could be anything that you want. And you just need to know that that box will contain something specific. So for instance, I want to make my book have a title and an author at the very least. So that's the attributes of this class here. The way you do that is I have to say, okay, a class can be accessed by another class, meaning I'm going to take this class and I'm going to be using it in my functions here. So this is one class. This is a separate class. They do not communicate with each other unless I add this class to the other class or vice versa. So what I want to be able to do is say, okay, anything inside this class can be used or accessed by any other class. And the way I do that, when I make my properties of the class, I put public. And I'm going to say public string. And I'm going to say title. And then I'm going to just do this. Oh, actually, it was already basically doing that for me. So this is called a getter and a setter. It only means, and we're not going to go into detail with this, so I don't want to go into the whole technical construct behind this. It simply means that you can get this property from another class and you can set the property from another class, meaning you can put some information in there and you can also get information out. So I want another one of these, and I'm going to call that it's public string and not description, but I want author. So now I have two properties fundamental to classes. We have a property called title and a property called author. And now what I want inside this class that's really going to help us understand how classes work is I want something that maybe displays the book to the viewer, whoever's going to be using this class. And so I'm going to now use this idea here. I'm going to make a function inside my class. See, this function here was inside this class. So I want to make a function for inside this class that's going to probably display the information. So I'm going to say public void, meaning it doesn't return anything, display info. And then I can open and close those brackets. And I don't have to worry about the void just yet because this is not a static class. So now what I'm going to put up in here, I'm going to put console.writeLine, and then I'm going to want to display, whoever uses this function, I want to display the title and the author. So we're going to use text, and we're going to say it's going to be actually concatenation is what it's called. We're going to connect our title and our author inside of this text. So if I was just writing this like this, right? If I was just putting some text in there, just like this, this is not necessarily string interpolation. What this is it's basically just a string. So this will be a string. So if I wanted to say, okay, I'm going to display the title, and then I'm going to want a colon there, and I want to put the title name, meaning whatever this variable is, whatever that title name is, I want it to go in here. Now we're talking about string interpolation, meaning it's going to take this variable and the string and sort of combine those together. Previously, what we would do is we would say, okay, well, I'm going to take that string and I'm going to do this. This is called concatenation. So if I would say the title like that. So when this runs, it's going to take this variable and this title here and put that together. So if this title was, the title of the book was called Cats, right? So this will say title, cats, something like that. But what we want to be able to do is something that's a little bit more readable than this. We're going to use the new way of concatenating or interpolating the text. So we're going to put $sign there, and then we're going to keep the quotes the way they are, and then we're going to take the name of this variable, and we're going to put it in brackets like that. That's a better way because now this is more readable. And so now it's going to say title, whatever the book title name is, and I'm going to do this, which is a new line, /n is a new line, and I'm going to put author, and I'm going to do the same thing with the author. I'm going to put that in those brackets, take the variable author and place that there, and then I'm done. I'm closed. So now what this will do is we'll display the word title plus the title, the word author in a new line plus author. So now let's go and use this class right here. So now we go back to our main program, and so we don't need this anymore. That was just a test. We don't need that anymore. So we're going to go ahead and create a new book. So the way we create a new book in object-oriented programming is we use a special keyword called new. And we have now, instead of a string or an integer, we now have a book. So just like you can have a string, an integer, you can have a float, you can have, any kind of object. A variable can be any kind of object. But we want a variable that is a book instead of a string when we work it down here. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, instead of string, we're going to say book, because we want to create a new book. And so we say book, and I'll just call this book 1, so that way we can have more than one book. And then I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to say book. I want to create another book, and I'll call that book 2. So what we did here is we took our class inside of this class, and we're connecting them. We're saying, I want to create a new version of this book class. So what the code is going to do is use this as a template, as a blueprint, and put it inside that variable. And then we said we want to make another blueprint. It's just like creating homes. So creating a class is just like the blueprint to a home. We know that the blueprint is not the home until someone makes the home, correct? So with that said, that means that when we create our class, we always think of it as we want to use this multiple times in different ways, so that way we can take these blueprints and make an actual physical object out of it. And so here we're making a physical book and a physical book number 2, and they're all books. So that's how you want to think about that. So now that we have these books, well, these books don't have a title and they don't have an author, because we know that there are those properties there, but we don't have a title or an author. So what we want to now do is set book number 1's author and title and book number 2's author and title. So I'm going to go down here and put book 1, and I'm going to hit dot, and then I can say author equals, and you want to put whatever, well, you can do whatever you want, but you can put title or author or whatever. So let's use something like F. And so now I set the author property inside the class. Now, if I were to make this not public, if I were to make this private, I'm going to get an error, because now it's saying that you can't set this property inside the class because it's private. So whoever's using this class will only have access to the title. And we'll talk about more object-oriented constructs because now you're in the advanced course or you're moving towards the advanced course. That's why you're watching this video. And so you'll get more details in that once you move towards the advanced course. So here I want to take that back and make it public. And now you see that's fine. And so now what I want to do is put the title. So I'm going to say book 1. And I'll put the title. And that will equal, I'm going to put that in quotes because it's going to be a string. And let's say and I'm going to have to close that out like that. Okay, so now I have one book set. And I can do the same thing with book 2. So let's look at book 2. I'm going to say book 2 dot author. That will equal, and I'm going to put quotes, and I'm going to put semicolon there to be sure. Let's say, oops, it has to go inside the quotes. All right, now I want to put the book 2 dot title, and then quotes, oops, equals, quotes, semicolon. I'm going to put all right. So now what I can do is this main program is going to run. There's not going to be any issues. There might be an issue actually, but we can solve that. But this program will run and nothing will be seen on the screen because we didn't print anything out. So if I run this, it just ran and closed again. And let's look down here. No errors, so we're good with that. What's the problem? Well, the problem is we didn't print anything out. So how can we do that? Well, if we remember, in our class, we have a function that does that for us inside of our class. So we don't have to do that in this main program by hitting cancel right line. All we have to do is this. Book 1 dot display info and book 2 dot display info, right? So now what should happen when we run this? It should display the info of both. So I'm going to hit Control F5. And now you see it, title 1, right? Title, author, title, author. So we got our application running. Now, another fundamental thing we want to be able to do is basically go over how we can actually store this inside of, let's say, like a list. And so for the sake of time, I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to write that out and then I'll explain it. But I'll go over every little thing once I'm done writing it. Give me 1 second. Okay, so what we're looking at here, we have our book class here. Now we have a library class. So a list of books can be considered a library. Inside of there, we have this list. This is a variable like everything else, but it is like an array. And it holds various objects. And what kind of objects does it hold? Well, we put it here. We want it to hold books. We could have put integers here if we wanted it to hold numbers. And we could have put strings here if we wanted to hold text or strings, okay, or string. But we didn't. We want this library, this variable, to hold books. So that's what this means. It's going to be a list of books. And now we give it a name. We just call it books. And then we create it. Remember, this is the template. And now we're going to create that list of books by using this right here, equals new list of books. And now we have a variable called books that can hold a list of books. Down here inside of our library class, we have a function. It's a public function, and it doesn't return anything. And the name of it is @book. That's the name of it. Now, this function takes an attribute, or it takes an argument, and that argument is called books. And what is books? It's a variable. But what kind of variable is it? It's a book variable. So we can only put books inside of this function. So now this function uses this variable name, and it's adding it right here to our list here, our list of books. So a book is added to the list of books. So that's why you see book.add. Add is a function that goes with lists. So it's easy to add things to a list by using the .add function. Then what we do is we console write line, and we use this the interpolation, the text interpolation, the string interpolation, sorry. And we're going to print out the title of that book plus to the library, meaning it should say added, and then the name of the book to the library. Added to Kill a Mockingbird to the library. That's what it will look like. Okay. And then we have another function inside of this very same class, the library class. And it's called list books. And this function, if you notice, is called list books because that's what we wanted to do, which brings up another component of the fundamentals that we need to maintain. Well-named functions. The function should be named what the function does. So add book should not be called, flying around the city and looking at birds.com. It should be called add books because that's what it does. List book should not be called, I just recently saw the last, Indiana Jones movie and it wasn't that great.com. Okay, that's a great title. So I give that to you, but it's not really telling me what the function does. The function actually lists books, so I want to make sure that I name it that. And then, so this function is a public function. It doesn't return anything, and this is the name of it. And then I'm going to first write this to the console, and now I'm going to use what's called a for each loop. And a for each loop is a loop that will loop through each element of an array or a list. And we happen to have a list of books. So we're saying, I want to create a new variable for this function. The new variable for this function is called books. But then you say, wait a minute, dude. How many variables could be named the same name? You got book here, you got book here. Okay, let me clarify something for you. This variable book is inside of this function, meaning this variable, even though it's the same name as this, is only going to be identified inside of this area here. This book is not the same as this one. This book right here, this variable, will only be used inside of this for loop function. So we can have the same name as long as it doesn't exist all the way outside at the top of the class up here. But even if it did, these are separate from everything else. So just understand that that scope, the scope of this book here, only exists within this function or this for each loop, and this book here only exists within this function here because we're using it as an argument. So now it's going to loop through this book. It's going to take this argument, and it's going to take each element, each one inside of this list, and it's going to put it inside of this function. This variable. Then for everything we have, every element we have inside of our list, it's going to book, and it's going to run a display information of the book, and then it's going to write that to the console. So let's see how we can use these libraries, this library, and our book inside of our main function down here. So it's very easy. We need to create another library. We need to create a library because we don't have it here. We have two books, but we don't have libraries. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new library. So I want a variable. I don't want this variable to be a string. I don't want this variable to be an integer. I don't want this variable to be a float. I don't want this variable to even be a book. I want this variable to be a library because we have our template here, class library. So I'm going to want it to be a library inside my main function. So I'm going to say library. I want it to be a library, and I'm just going to call it library. I'm going to name it library. Now, again, we can't have a variable with the same name as the class or two variables with the exact same name. But if you notice, in C#, it goes by the capital. So it's case sensitive. So an uppercase is different than a lowercase. So that's how I get away with having a library and a lowercase library. And so then it says new library. Now I've created a new library. Now, how do I use that library? Well, I already created my books. And since the library can already do this part, remember over here, it lists books. So all I need to do here is add the books to the library. So I say library dot add books. And where is add books coming from? This function here, that public function. So I can say add books, and I'm going to say book one, and I'm going to do the same thing for book two. Okay. Now, even though it added it, it's not printing it because remember here, adding books simply adds it and it says what is being added. But now we want to go ahead and list all our books. And we can use that last function. So we say library dot list books. And this is why you want your variables, I'm sorry, your functions and your variables to have proper names. Because you have to imagine this main function and these classes normally would not be in the same file. I'm only using it in the same file because of, presentation purposes. So that way you can see all this happening. Normally, it would probably be another class file over here. You wouldn't even see all this. So the coder, the programmer who's using your classes, who's using your library class, and who's using your book class may never see all of this in here, but they can access the variables. And so that's why you want these names, and that's why you want everything readable. So now when I run, it should be able to do all that. I'm hit Control F5, and now look what happens. It says added The Great Gatsby to the library, added To Kill a Mockingbird to the library, and then it says library books, title, and then it looped through. Remember, it looped through that one, and then it looped through this one, and there's our application. So let's break down some of the things that we just now accomplished here. And actually, it went a little bit longer than I wanted to because I was thinking of something a bit more simple. But I mean, this is pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. It does everything we want it to do. We talked about classes and objects. So the objects and classes is the books and the library. So we did our method callouts. Yeah, we did all that. Yeah, this text, it showcases a lot of the things that you would need to know or remember before going to an advanced class. And I think that by going through this, it's a very good start. So when you enter into the advanced class on your first day, there should be some sort of fundamentals, recap, and it should go over some of these things. And when it does, your memory be jarred. But if not, you already went over it, and it's going to make life a lot easier for you. So hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys next time.